Are we going to tuck our shirts in? Come on.
It's the most important job in a school. The head teacher is responsible for hundreds of staff and sometimes thousands of pupils. To be a success, you need resilience, vision and leadership. But do you need a teaching qualification as well? According to the government, you don't. Ministers say non-teachers could run schools in the future. Unsurprisingly, the prospect of heads with no classroom experience has proved controversial. In this programme, we hear both sides of the argument.
I wouldn't want to be led into battle by somebody that's never been shot at.
I don't profess to want to be, or that I would be, a great classroom teacher, but I think maybe I could be a great head because I do feel I've got leadership skills.
If you haven't taught and struggled with it and failed at it and succeeded marginally in some areas, then how will you know how the people that you're leading feel?
I think we should allow the possibility that there are some people who would be effective head teachers who are not qualified teachers.
A good manager can manage any business, but to lead you require credibility within the community, the professional community that you're leading.
Cowley Language College is a secondary school in St Helens on Merseyside. It has almost 1,400 pupils and 150 staff. The school is rated good by Ofsted, and head teacher Cameron Sheeran is planning a massive £21 million rebuilding project. If you had ambitions to become a head, this would be a rewarding and challenging job. Mr Sheeran's showing no signs of wanting to retire yet, but he's already worried at how few of his teachers would want to take over when he does.
If I talked to the members of staff here in the school and asked out of 100 teachers or more how many would aspire to be a head teacher, and I would probably say 2. When I first started teaching, it was something that you would actively work for. I'm sad to say that people don't want the job. They don't want the extra responsibility. They don't want the extra accountability and the pressure and the hours. Let's speak very clear about that. They don't want that.
At Cowley, one person who does want the challenge of running a school is the business manager, Kerry Callaghan. She's taken the National Professional Qualification for Headship, or NPQH, and wants to move upwards.
I do enjoy being here. I do enjoy my role, but I would like it to take it that little step further, because a lot of the things that a head would do, I already do. So teaching and learning, I'm not professing to be an expert in any sense of the word, but I do believe that you don't have to be an educationalist to be a head teacher. I think it's about leading an organisation forward, and I believe I've got the skills to do that.
Kerry's worked in schools for many years, and she's already part of Cowley's senior management team, but she's not a qualified teacher and has never taught a class.
I don't want to be a teacher. I don't want to stand in a classroom and teach the children. It's just not something I've ever wished to do. I understand completely, what good teaching and learning is. I've seen I've seen numerous excellent teachers, and I don't think that's for me.
If Kerry moves up to the top job at Cowley or another school, she could well be the first non-teacher in recent times to run a state school, and she's got the backing of her boss.
What I see in Kerry, I see somebody who really aspires to go further in schools, but she has a heart for children. If I had somebody who walked into a school who had no heart for children and it was all balance sheets, that's the wrong person for a school. Whereas Kerry has that heart for the children. She really does want to see children work forward. She has a passion about the school, and she's the right type of person to be leading a school.
In the staff room, though, teachers are worried at the idea of someone with no classroom experience taking over a school.
Well, I don't agree with it. Because you can't have someone telling you how to do your job if they've never been in there and done it themselves. Well, I don't think it's right.
But you've got to have some sort of experience of working in the teaching profession, really, to make it work. But, right, if you're the right person for the right job, then I don't think if you make it work, then it's no problem.
They didn't really understand our issues that we faced in the classroom on a day-to-day basis because they haven't experienced it, at the chalk face.
However reluctant the staff may be, there is now a real possibility that Kerry Callaghan and other non-teachers could take over in the head's office. A government-commissioned report from city consultants PricewaterhouseCoopers recommends exactly that. John Lakin led the team that wrote the report.
What we had in mind was opening up the maximum talent pool to schools. It will be schools' individual decision as to who they appoint to the various leadership positions. And we were saying that in certain circumstances it was possible to envisage that not being a qualified teacher. Primarily we were talking about the existing cohort of bursars and support staff that are inside schools, but also opening the door to potentially people wanting to come in and train from outside.
John Lakin's report took 9 months to complete, and the government are taking it very seriously. Schools Minister Jim Knight told us that the ultimate decision on who runs a school is for governors and local authorities, but in a statement he said, "We do need leadership teams with wider skill sets to meet today's challenges and expectations." The idea of managers with no teaching experience running schools has come to prominence through the PwC report, but it was originally suggested by the School Leaders Union, the ASCL.
We said in our evidence to the PricewaterhouseCoopers review that we thought that the possibility of people who are not qualified teachers becoming the principal of institutions, head teacher if you like, should be opened up. And we come to this in a rather interesting way because we have now several hundred bursars and business managers and senior support staff, behaviour managers, inclusion managers, all sorts of different job titles, people who have become full members of senior leadership teams of schools, but who are not qualified teachers. And we've seen a lot of that over the last few years. And many of those people have come into membership of our association. And it seems to us only right that the best of those people should have the opportunity to come through to the top job.
Perhaps unsurprisingly, one of the main teaching unions, the NUT, is dead against the idea of non-teachers running schools.
We'd be happy, and we are happy, to have people who act as bursars, or indeed, as some schools have, as business managers within the school. We're happy for those things to happen. But the person who should be leading that school should be a head teacher. And they should be people with an educational background, with the teacher's background, and with qualified teacher status. In that way, they'll have the full confidence of the teaching staff, and I think the other staff, and they'll have the full confidence of the parents too. But the key idea for a school is not to be efficient as a business, but is to provide a good education for youngsters. So the business manager, they should be there, but they should be under the direction and work under the direction of a qualified teacher, a head teacher.
And it's not just the NUT that doesn't like the idea. Graham Brown is head of Estover Community College in Devon.
Head teacher is that head teacher. Schools are there to develop children, young people's, teenagers, students' learning. That's their job. Business management is a means to an end. The role of the school is within teaching and learning. So the highest order professional must surely be steeped in that.
Graham Brown has also done a stint working as a regional leader for the National College of School Leadership. That brought him into contact with many other head teachers, and their reaction to heads without qualified teacher status is plain.
Right, a quick question, because we'll talk about it till 7 o'clock this evening. Quick question. Must a head hold QTS?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
A very mischievous question.
We are discovering the need for people to know more about education
in order to help to run education. And it's very clear that they're discovering that too.
You'd have somebody to manage the budget, the finance, the buildings, all that kind of thing, employment of ancillary staff and all that kind of thing. But you do need, I think, somebody who knows about education.
I think Arsene Wenger wasn't a particularly good player, but he has played. And I think heads can be very good heads who weren't particularly great in the classroom. They have to have taught, I think.
You've got to have an educational ethos,
and
a philosophy. I think we've got school business managers. Why do we need actually to have? They don't run the school. Yeah. They are a fundamental part of how schools can run very, very well, and free up the head to be the creative driving force for education, which is what they're supposed to be in their school.
I have no doubt
that there will be people without school backgrounds, without QTS backgrounds, that will make a magnificent job, as I might make a magnificent military commander. But there'll be a huge amount of luck involved.
The trouble is, the proposal and objections are theoretical. There's currently no state-funded school with a head who's not qualified to teach, but it hasn't always been that way. In fact, Sydney Stringer School in the centre of Coventry owes its existence to a man with no teaching qualifications or experience. In the early 1970s, the school was set up as an experimental community college. The head was Geoffrey Holroyd.
My own background, I came here in 1971, in fact from industry, having been concerned with the management of high technology in English Electric, and then with school leaver recruitment and the training of young people in British Leyland. In that job, I got very close to education, became very interested in and concerned with what went on in secondary schools and how they were managed, and to cut a long story short, arrived here in 1971.
These days, Geoffrey Holroyd is retired. He spent 4 years at Sydney Stringer in the 70s, but did having a non-teacher in charge help or hinder the school?
Hello.
Hello.
May I come to see the headmaster?
Right, would you just like to sign in for me?
Thank you. Well, I think the experience in industry had made me think about the learning process. So I think I had enough feel for what we wanted to do, but the important thing was to share this vision with the people who were coming to join us and together work out a strategic concept to which we all subscribed. And it seems to me in any organisation that's absolutely vital, that you have to have an ethos and a strategy which everybody subscribes to. And then inside that you have little tactical plans and things that have to make it work. But you must all be pointing in the same direction.
There's quite a lot of migration.
35 years later, Geoffrey Holroyd says his industrial experience was a great benefit to the school. But is that how the staff remember it? Alex Begbie is now head of Kenilworth School, but in the 70s he taught science at Sydney Stringer. And Brian Worrell is the current head of the school.
So what I wanted to ask you was, what was it like to be a teacher in a school where the boss is not a teacher?
Well, I think the boss was Geoffrey. I mean, you know, that was the issue. I mean, didn't even really decide whether he was a teacher or not, but he had certain visions, certain views. Sometimes you had to make decisions which went against the sort of lefties, you know, the sort of the people like myself, and because you were trying to manage the school. Yeah. And I think that probably, although it was, I think you had a very clear management structure.
Once we'd established the ethos, and we'd set it out on paper in simple language, and everybody signed up for the ethos, and we had a wonderful team of people who wanted to make it work. My job from then onwards as the head was really very easy. It was just to facilitate this and let them do it. And I think I do understand the learning process because most of my jobs have been concerned with learning situations, admittedly, not in schools. Not everything about learning is taught in colleges of education. There are other places where learning is understood and practiced. So I think I did come here with some concept of the learning process and some of my ideas. But then having said that, it's the teachers who do the job. It's the staff who run the place. And I think it's very dangerous if the head of a school always tries to do everything and be everything. The job of a head is to release the energy and the creativity and the skills of the other 100 or so people who are there.
It's very important that the leader of an institution has a view of teaching and learning.
Yes.
Both of the adults in the school, you know, how they make. And I think you had quite a good view of how adults could progress as well.
Yes.
I mean, I think in terms of in service or whatever you might call it.
But it doesn't. But you can learn that in places other than colleges of education.
I think so.
But how did you know whether it worked? Or what would you do if you had a child and parents came to you and said, we're really worried he's not learnt anything in maths in year 7 or first year that he hasn't done at primary school? Where would that be picked up?
Well, you have a team of senior people.
It would always be picked up by
help.
a team.
You have to rely on your senior people.
Right.
The captain of an aircraft carrier doesn't actually fly the aeroplane or start the engines.
Did that work, Alex?
There were times when I think that some people felt that Geoffrey was hiding behind that kind of comment when really there were troubles outside that needed a real, needed somebody to come and really, I mean, in a way, you were reliant quite a lot on the strength of the people around you.
Totally. I relied completely on my senior staff and the team of advisors in the Education Authority. No one person could be an expert in everything. That was where we came in, over there.
As the heads look back over the birth of Sydney Stringer, Geoffrey Holroyd feels his leadership as a non-teaching head worked well.
It was.
Well, I think it must have done, because the present head says that some of those children who are now parents look back with great affection of the school that they came to and want their children to come to as well. And the proof of the pudding is in the eating. The school is still here, and it worked at the time. And we had very few problems, in a difficult area. We had very few problems of discipline. The exam results gradually got better and better, so one can only assume that it was working. 971.
There are caveats, though. Alex Begbie says it worked because of Geoffrey Holroyd's particular skills as a leader, almost despite his lack of teaching experience. He wouldn't like to see the experiment repeated.
If you've got somebody coming in to observe your lesson who has never taught a lesson, and they say they could ask questions, but to make a judgment about whether it's good or bad, could they? Don't know. So I think that that judgment is got about the quality of teaching and learning in a school. It's got to be the key judgment a head makes. If you haven't had experience on it, you'd worry that people can do it.
It worked for a while in terms of what it was doing, which was selling a big idea and creating a pioneering school. It came unstuck. I mean, Alex also said that there were lots of things that had to be undone and done again, and gaps to be filled in, because simply Geoffrey didn't know about them and didn't need to know about them, or didn't think he did. So there was a lot of people running around making it happen, as well. So I think it worked because of Geoffrey's charisma and because of his personality and his inspiration and his belief in children and education. But that isn't enough sometimes when you've got a stroppy bored group of kids on a wet Wednesday who don't want to do this English set text.
Geoffrey Holroyd agrees, seeing himself almost as the exception that proves the rule.
I think by and large there are going to be very few examples of heads who haven't come up through a traditional route. And indeed it would be very sad for the profession if that happened. I mean, look at the problems we have in the health service, where the consultants and the doctors feel the whole thing is being managed by people who don't know anything about what they're doing. Yes, I think if the teaching profession is going to have a career structure, it must lead to the top, and it must lead to headships. I think a few people coming from outside to do something which is different, not as it were already in the system, can be quite healthy. And I think Sydney Stringer did a few things which have infected some of the other schools in Coventry. We tried things and it worked, and it's been taken on.
I've split mine into three.
One other teacher who began her career at Sydney Stringer was the future Education Secretary, Estelle Morris.
I started teaching this September, and Sydney Stringer is my first school, so I'm a probationary teacher just out of college.
Estelle, now Baroness Morris, spent 18 years at Sydney Stringer, but she remembers the early years under Geoffrey Holroyd as a very special time.
The important things about Geoffrey's leadership was that he was so encouraging to take risks. He was the last person to actually say, don't do that, that's not your place, you're a junior member of staff. So the whole atmosphere was, I might be a probationary teacher, but my views are invited. And I just never went through that period, where as a new teacher, I couldn't sit in someone's chair, or I couldn't speak my mind at a staff meeting, or I couldn't walk into the head's office and say, I've got a good idea. I, as Estelle Morris, never experienced that because I taught at Sydney Stringer.
I think the role of the head is undoubtedly that of a manager. And this is all the business of establishing.
So the big difference about Geoffrey, he just gave power, he devolved power all the time. That's what he did. He went round there and empowered people to take responsibility. Now, I may be wrong, but I think it was easier for him to do that as a non-teacher because his world wasn't my world, than ever it would have been as a teacher who'd gone through the system. He was a tremendously empowering individual.
So from personal experience, Estelle Morris supports the idea of people without teaching qualifications taking the top job. But she too wouldn't want a direct repeat of Sydney Stringer.
Its failure was this not having a head of teaching and learning at the, alongside Geoffrey. Geoffrey could be head, but he had to be almost primus inter pares, I think, and we should have had this figure who was head of teaching and learning, and we didn't.
This model of having a director of teaching and learning working closely with a non-qualified head is part of the Pricewaterhouse recommendations to the government. According to PwC, the head needn't be a teacher as long as the deputy is.
The lead professional has to be appropriately qualified in that profession. The question is whether that lead professional, who is part of a leadership team, also should be the head of that institution. And therefore one can look at other instances in the university sector, in the health sector, in the local authority sector, where there is still a head of profession, head of leading the profession, but they are not necessarily the leader of the institution.
Part of the rationale for bringing in non-qualified heads to run schools is that the role of managing teaching and learning and managing the rest of the school's activities has simply become too demanding for one person. In effect, the PwC report says there could be an extra post for a non-teacher to oversee the school. It's a persuasive point. Bring in a professional manager to free up a deputy to look after teaching and learning. At the John Warner School in Hertfordshire, students have benefited from astute financial management. Head David Kennedy has raised millions of pounds to build a new science block and state-of-the-art new sports facility. He disagrees with the PwC report, saying heads with a teaching background can manage large projects without becoming overwhelmed.
Skills that are associated with business people are an important part of modern headship now, but they're not exclusive to business people. They are in fact skills of actually putting a project together, making sure you can finance that project and making sure it's realistic and carrying it through in a premeditated fashion. When I came here, I had experience of doing quite a considerable amount of building because I had been the deputy head of a large school which had a large amount of building done to it, so I had some experience of contracts. But what I learned was to engage proper professionals, so that if you're doing a large project, you engage project managers, architects of high quality, and you get the professionals to manage that. So that I think most head teachers know how to do that. It's engage professionals, pay them, and hold them to account.
How long have you been at this? And when did you start?
David Kennedy's not only raised millions for new facilities, he's raised academic standards beyond recognition. He says schools can't do that unless the buck stops with someone who understands the classroom because they've been a teacher.
And have you improved? Do you think you got better at IT?
Yeah.
Can you type well now?
Faster than I did before.
What is the function of our business here? It is about teaching and learning. It's about learning, really. And that is what all of our efforts should be bent at, improving the children's learning and the outcomes that they get. Many schools have undergone a short-term improvement, and then they have declined. What we have hopefully managed to do is to ensure a continuous improvement that is bedded into the school, which means that we default to excellence at all times. Many schools that have been famously turned round are now back in special measures. And that is one of the problems. You need to build the capacity of the school to go on getting better. And that is about motivating teachers, it's about the craft of teaching and learning, and that is something that you need to have done yourself in order to know what the priorities are.
So, according to David Kennedy, heads need an understanding of business and experience in the classroom. A tall order, but not impossible. Nabil Shaban is head of professional studies at the John Warner School. 3 years ago, he was a high-flying manager at a city bank. He's an ambitious man, but rather than parachute straight into the head's office, he decided to start in the classroom.
Plans of what? Before the templates, you're thinking the web page. For me personally, I think having come into the educational system and having the grounding as a teacher and honing my skills as a teacher has empowered me to actually become a more effective manager in the school. I could have applied as an experienced management manager from a different industry, to come directly in an SLT position. But then I would have had to tackle the credibility issue and deal with winning people on board from a perspective where they are more experienced in their product. And I might have the better ideas, I might have the right answers, but just because I do not have the credibility, I become an obstacle rather than a facilitator, as any leader should be, to progress.
For Nabil, some of the normal rules of business are suspended when you enter teaching.
Web schema. The navigation. When we do a PowerPoint presentation. We're not in a retail industry. What do you do? We're in a very specific service industry that has a lot of moral and ethical responsibilities. So yes, you can apply. It is a business with X million of pound turnover. As a school, it is a business. You know, we have a budget, we have a P&L, we have, you know, expenditure. All these things do exist and can be managed and should be managed as a business. However, a head is not just the business manager. He's also the leader of a community function. And that community function has a ripple effect, not within the school only, but outside the school. His moral values are reflected in the classrooms because he is the focus on the quality of teaching within the school.
I would like you to make
the concept of managers with no teaching qualifications running schools will always be controversial. Supporters say it's a way of releasing talent at a time when future heads are in short supply. But many of the heads and teachers we've spoken to say it's dangerous to divorce school management from teaching and learning.